I'd like to thank everybody who supported us, supported me, and to anybody who didn't, hopefully we'll be able to persuade you that the right thing took place during this election, and I look forward to learning about the operations of the town and see what we can do to make things work a little more smoothly.
And again, I'll just briefly, again, I want to thank, of course, all of, not just the supporters, but really all the participants in this process. There were something like 18 candidates and for all the other offices and a pretty good voter turnout, and I really think that no matter how things shake out, it's really the fact that everybody participated in the process. It really makes everybody a winner in this, and I think that's just great. So our job, we're here to work for you, everybody in the town, not just those who voted or didn't vote one way or the other, and hold us to that, please. The other...
Rob.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
I would like to thank everybody also, because we are newly elected.
Oh, that's true.
I want to thank everyone for supporting me for a 4th term. I'm humbled and honored by it, and I hope we can do good things like we did the last 2 years, and we can work together and do what's best for Tiverton. Thank you.
I'd just like to thank everyone again for allowing me to have this incredible opportunity and responsibility, and I hope that my work as a counselor will always be in the spirit of doing what is best for the community. Thank you.
And I also would like to thank everyone that voted for me. I feel honored to be here again, and hopefully we'll do great things for Tiverton and the taxpayers. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And again, just cleaning up on some agenda items. Madam Clerk, may we reflect for the record or in the minutes that Justin Katz's resignation we have on file for the Budget Committee. That's correct?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we are, we have a heavy agenda here, and as you can see, we're handling it masterfully. We now have the consent agenda items, as has always been the case. These are here. They'll be brought in under one action unless somebody requests otherwise. We have receipt of minutes from various boards and commissions, some correspondence, the approval of tax assessor abatements, reports from the town administrator, and a report from the town planner. May we approve the consent agenda in one vote, or would anybody like to take something up?
Mr. President, I have just a quick question on CA4 and CA2, although it's just a general, general questions, nothing in particular.
Any other topics of interest? Okay. So how about a vote to accept on the consent agenda items 1, 3, 5, and 6?
I'd like to make a motion to accept CA 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6.
1, 3, 5, and 6.
Second.
1, 2, 3, 5, and 6.
1, 3,
1, 3, 5,
and
and 6. Okay.
Second.
Any objection to go to a vote? Hearing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? That looked unanimous. Justin?
On 2A, I just had a very quick question on things that call, letters or documents that call for some kind of action. I'm just assuming that, in general, if there is something that we actually have to discuss or vote on that you can't take care of as administrator, you'll alert us. Because this one said we have to take, the town has to take an action. So that's been taken. Is that correct? Or there's...
I think that's generally correct. I sometimes have the same question, though. And with respect to the CRMC item, if I'm not mistaken, that refers to Mr. Cox being an alternate member of the council. I had actually meant to give him a call today to see if he was ready to continue in that capacity, but I haven't had a chance to do that. So.
Okay. And then on CA4, I just very quickly on the police records, it's broken out by arrests and then casino-related. Are the casino ones included in the general log, or are they listed separately? So if you wanted to know the full number.
I'm going to ask the chief to answer that question, if you don't mind.
Good evening. So, just your question again, sir.
Just on the monthly reports of arrests and such, it's listed as what happened during the month, and then separately casino related.
Correct.
I just want to check if the casino related incidents are included in the total number, or if they're broken out separately?
They're included. So that's, the general arrests are the total arrests by the department, and then it's specific to the casino.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
May I have a motion to approve items 2 and 4 on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Second call? Hearing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Very well, unanimous, thank you. We just have 2 items for the open forum, so mindful of the time, let's take those 2 up. But, so we have Mr. Joe Souza on the topic of landfill. And again, this is more of a one-way communication in the open forum, so we don't mean to be disrespectful, but we can't get into too much discussion, but please tell us what's on your mind.
I just want you to listen, please. My name's Joseph R. Souza, 49 Hancock Street. Don't know how many of you have been to our landfill lately. We're approaching closure. We need to work on a transfer station. The landfill committee was attending most of the meetings a couple of years ago. We had already had to come up with, I think, 3 possible sites. None have been picked, and nothing's been done to start the operation of building. This is something that we can build in-house, save a lot of money, but it's going to take some time. Public Works people have multiple duties, but I spoke with Kim. He told me that pretty much if we can get started on it now, by the time the landfill closes, they can complete it in-house. We need to pick a site. There's been several sites that have been looked at, and we felt were appropriate. A couple up in the industrial park, and one behind the DPW, where you would access it from that little road, which is below the police station. All of them would work, but we need to pick one, and we need to move forward on it. This is something that we can't procrastinate. We're filling in the road at the landfill now. Once that road is filled in, the old road, that's it. The cap goes on. We got to start trucking to Johnston. We're still going to have mattresses, box springs, couches, furniture, large plastic. I could go on. We take a lot of stuff, you know, all of our grass clippings and branches and things, right? It's an operation. It takes maybe 2.5 acres to operate. So that's my concern. I'm expecting that the landfill committee hopefully can get back together and give you some good recommendations. Hopefully we can get on the agenda early in next year and get started on that. The only other thing I wanted to say is we had a vote on the casino money. The question was put to the people. I know the vote was close, and I find it kind of ironic that the same people that voted against the casino came out to tell us how to spend the money. Fortunately, we prevailed, in my opinion, and that we need to see tax relief with that money. That was a promise made that needs to be kept. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ms. Lorraine Broder from for topic of Country View Estates. And by the way, we definitely do not need your address. Don't want to hear your address. Just tell us your connection to Tiverton. You live here, you work here. That's all we need to know.
I live at Country View Estates, and I am the secretary for the Country View Citizens Association, and I would like to extend my congratulations to the newly elected people, and from the board and from the citizens. We have worked with the council in the past. We have a lot of unresolved issues with the homeowners, Hometown America. I'm sorry, not the homeowners, but the landowners. And it's Hometown America. They are a very large business, have many, many, many manufactured home parks in the country. We do have a lot of unresolved issues. It is a senior thing. We are pricing people out. Anyway, I invite you to come to the meet and greet on Wednesday the 5th for a half hour, and you're most welcome to stay for the membership meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, that'll conclude the open session. So on the agenda, I don't think I'm exaggerating to say we have something like 150 maybe more, license renewals, and I guess it's just a question for all of you. I know there's a lot of people here for the solar ordinance topic. How many people are here for license renewals that are not here for the solar ordinance topic? Okay. Is there an objection to take those out of order, or what, any strong feelings on this? Okay.
So it's the casino. So it's the casino and the flea market, correct? Anyone else?
Well, I'm thinking we should maybe take those out. How many are here for the solar ordinance topic? Yeah. Well, it's about even, actually. All right, why don't we stick with the agenda as we have it then? I thought maybe there was an imbalance. All right. So we are now on the topic of a public hearing, to repeal the zoning ordinance. This is Article 24, Solar Photovoltaic System Developments. And this relates to the Solar Photovoltaic System Development Ordinance, the Tiverton Planning Board recommendation, and we have a solicitor memorandum. I'd like to ask, does anybody want to introduce this topic before we kick it off into an open public hearing?
Sure, I could introduce that topic for you. The solar ordinance amendment that's in your packet was recently enacted by the council this past summer. This answered some questions about where solar developments would be allowed in the town, when they would be allowed as an accessory use, and what the restrictions on that would be. So a couple of large solar system applications have come before the planning board. That goes through a major land development process before the planning board. There has been some concern about clearing of trees, using up of farmland. That's why the planning board wanted to take a second look at the solar ordinance that was passed after they've seen some applications come in. There was discussion about whether they could put a moratorium in place while they reconsidered what they had. We did the memo that's in the packet. Basically, we said you can't do a moratorium unless you go through the notice of public hearing process, which you have tonight, which the planning board has recommended to you that you repeal the ordinance, which would essentially revert the town back to what was previously the regulatory scheme, which would mean there would be no large solar energy systems allowed. You could still do it as an accessory use, but that would be more on a case-by-case basis decided by the building official to whether it was actually an accessory use to the primary use. And that would, the hopes of the planning board is that would hit the pause button on the applications while they reworked the ordinance, and would hopefully come back with a new ordinance for you to consider in the future.
And do we have anybody from the planning board here?
Rosemary. Rosemary's here.
Okay, anybody that wants to be. Okay.
Come on, Rosemary.
So, well, I'll take it that
No, she's coming, she's coming.
I assume there's no objection here from the planning board before we open the hearing?
Nope.
Okay.
She's really mad at me for pointing her out.
How do you do? I'm Rosemary Eva. I am a member of the planning board and not prepared to speak on this other than I voted in favor of the Repeal Act. Unfortunately, our vice chair was supposed to be here, but she's not feeling well. What would you like to know? I mean, I think Peter did a good job with this. I mean, it has a long, we were approached several months ago, and I see one of the attorneys here that proposed it. It was for a large scale. We didn't have a solar ordinance on the books per se, and we worked on it, and there are some problems with it. And as Mr. Squares says, we have had a barrage of applications that have come in, and I think we saw some of our problems, and our administrative officer, who has been involved in every one of the applications, can speak more to it. I have not been as involved in the day-to-day as I used to be. So.
Okay, that's great. Well, I think with that introduction, we'll declare the public hearing open, and
The planner wanted.
the planner, if you'd like to start us off.
Good evening. I'm Bill Compton. I'm the administrative officer to the planning board and also the town planner. And just to give you a very brief overview, we currently have 6 large-scale solar applications pending. One of them has received master plan approval. One of them, actually the smallest of the bunch, has begun the master planning process, had its first public information hearing. And we have another which is quite large, 100-acre site, 60 acres of solar panels, which has submitted a master plan. That master plan has not been certified as complete as of yet. We have 3 other projects that have been submitted. One's coming before the planning board in December for a concept plan review, and then there's 2 others whose applications that we've received, which could come before the planning board in January or February for concept plan review, depending on the outcome of your decision regarding the solar ordinance tonight. If the council decides to repeal the solar ordinance, then those applications would essentially be tabled until the planning board can develop a new amended ordinance. The board has already begun to discuss forming a committee and plans on bringing an amended ordinance back to the town council as quickly as possible while still doing a good job. We don't want to rush it, but nor do we want to delay coming back to you with an amended ordinance. If you have any specific questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I have a question for the planner. Mr. Compton, I'd have a quick, you listed 4 projects. It sounds as if you're saying the outcome of any vote we might take has no effect on them. Is that the assessment?
Peter, that's not true, right? Because you said that if the master plan was approved, then that's okay, but if it's going through the process and it's not complete, then it doesn't fall under.
So under the
Right.
master plan process, you have a pre-submission meeting and then also a post-submission meeting. If you submit a complete application prior to the date of this repeal, you'll be considered under the previously in effect ordinance. If you don't get your submission in until after the repeal, then you'll be considered under the repealed ordinance, whatever you do after, whatever's in effect after you vote tonight.
Okay,
So basically 3 and 3.
It's 3 and 3.
So 3 are, by 3 and 3 you mean?
The 3 applications would fall under the existing ordinance, and 3 applications, because they are concept plan submissions and a master plan has not been submitted, would fall under a new amended ordinance, unless, of course, you decide not to repeal the existing ordinance, and then things would remain the same.
I thought you said that the 3rd one was not deemed complete.
It's been, and we're getting into a sort of nuanced area of the law, so I'll defer to Peter. It's been submitted, but we've not yet certified it as complete. But I think it still falls under the old ordinance, is my understanding.
So once an application is submitted, Bill has 25 days to certify it complete or not. If he certifies it as complete, it will be considered submitted as of the date, a complete application as of the date of submission. So if even after this ordinance is repealed, he determined that it was complete when it was submitted prior to the ordinance, they would have vested rights to be considered under the prior ordinance. If he determines it's not a complete application because they didn't submit something that's required of the regulations, then they would be considered under the whatever you do tonight.
And now, what criteria would determine whether they're certified as complete? Is that a strict set of metrics that have to be met, or is that you could say, well, I'm not going to certify these as complete because the law has changed?
There's a checklist that the planning board has enacted for all master plan applications through their subdivision regulations. Essentially, if they meet every item on the checklist, you're complete. If they miss an item that is required for that application, then it's not complete.
So the objective is a
Yes,
list of,
it's essentially, follow the checklist, submit every item on the checklist. If you do, it's complete.
So the criteria is basically whether they made an error in their application. If they didn't make an error, there's no choice but to certify them as complete.
That's correct.
Correct.
So can you just help me understand? So we didn't have an ordinance. We passed an ordinance just a few months ago, and now the recommendation is to repeal that ordinance.
Correct.
So, I'm just wondering, so can I just get a little more context on what did we not like get the ordinance right the first time? Like did something change? What happened in such a short period of time to?
Since I wasn't present when the ordinance originally was drafted, I can't tell you what was in the minds of the planning board members that confected the ordinance. But my observation is that the size and scale of the solar projects that are being submitted was far greater than what the town had anticipated. That has caused quite a bit of controversy, for lack of a better term, and public comment. And so the planning board thought it was in the best interest of the town to revisit the ordinance now that, as Ms. Eva said, we have some experience with the applications. It's a new industry. It's a new type of application, not only for Tiverton, but my peers, planning directors in other towns in Rhode Island, are grappling with the very same issue. It is, and statewide planning is aware of it. It's a priority issue in planning in Rhode Island, and is how to deal with the siting of solar energy farms.
Jump in.
I was just wondering, with the previous town council, if they could maybe enlighten us as to why you thought it was okay to adopt it, 3/12/18, because I don't know, like, did you think it was okay, or did someone tell you it was okay?
It was presented to us.
It was recommended by the planning board.
The history behind this was that at some point, some period of time ago, a farmer with a working legitimate farm in Tiverton had approached the town about being able to include solar on the property. So I believe, although I wasn't at the planning board meetings, part of the reason for allowing solar installations in the residential zones, which is really what the worry about this ordinance was to give legitimate farmers the ability to have some opportunity to have some auxiliary revenue. It's hard to make a living as a farmer today, and the town is very committed to supporting the farm community. But I don't think anybody envisioned what's happening, which is not that this is sort of becoming an auxiliary use on farm properties. What we're seeing is, farm properties being converted entirely over to solar. So it's something of the law of unintended consequences. The other thing that has put Tiverton a little bit more in the crosshairs is that, and as Bill mentioned, DEM's Farm, Forest, and Open Space Program is revisiting their approach to solar. The Office of Energy Resources is coming up with a model ordinance because so many communities are grappling with this. And a number of other communities have already closed this process down waiting. So Tiverton is now, we are the open field for everybody who wants to try and do this someplace in the state, because our ordinance is still in effect where a number of other communities saw what was happening, the law of unintended consequences, and pulled it back. As Bill said, it's brand new, so nobody quite envisioned what's happening. It started as, again, as an idea in the residential zones to allow the legitimate farm properties to have something else to augment their revenue.
What I have is from February 15th, 2018, from a law firm, Benson Law Office of Allen Amaral, and the zoning ordinance modifications to allow solar installations. And what I saw was, this was to Ms. Mello, was that this attorney was writing on behalf of the clients, the Peckham family who owns Farrell Bank Farms. I believe that's where it started. Am I correct on that? Okay. So what caught my eye, though, was that, all right, that's fine, the Peckham family, Farrell Bank Farms, we don't have a solar ordinance. But what caught my eye was that the client, Jason Peckham, was on the planning board special committee and to develop the zoning modification. And I just thought it was inappropriate. I just don't understand. It just hit me the wrong way, like it was not quite ethical. The person that wants this is now on the subcommittee trying to make an ordinance in their favor. It has to be all of Tiverton's favor. And then looking at the ordinance and the grid, and I'm looking at it, and I see P's everywhere, and it means permitted, and I'm like, are you kidding me? It's everywhere. Now, this is, I can see maybe the farms, you know, what they need to do, and I understand some of the problems with the farms. But what I'm not understanding is taking a farm and making it commercial. We don't allow that. It's like, I'll just make up a farm. Sunnybrook Farm, lovely farm, lots of acreage. And then we take a car dealership and we plunk it there. Well, it's not commercial. This is no different. We need to get our heads set. They use the word farm so that you accept it. And then after reading more about solar, they use the word garden. And then I started going, well, how about bouquet? And then, you know, how about, you know, we're gonna grow roses. I mean, it sounds so lovely, but you're turning green into gray and black. And you have to be careful. I don't want to not permit it, but I think it has to be done in a way that you start here, you know, what's going to be first, what's going to be second, and where do you want the other. I've looked at some other towns, and they have very specific areas where you can have this commercial solar, because you don't want your town to look the way you don't want it to be. And I was reading the comprehensive plan, and I was going to start counting how many times I saw historic character, the beauty of the town, over and over and over again. So I'm thinking that the solar ordinance is not meeting any of the criteria of what the town wanted to look like in our comprehensive plan. And I know people are in a hurry to get, you know, this process done, but I don't want it in a hurry. I want it right, because this is going to be a legacy going forward that we're leaving to the generations before us. And if we mess up, we're not going to have a very pretty town anymore. And that's what makes it really special. So I certainly don't want this to happen again, where the party, interested party, is on a board.
I'm done.
Can you help me understand, so in the absence of an ordinance, are we back to a baseline where there is no solar?
So, in the absence of an ordinance, solar would still be allowed as an accessory use to an allowed use on the property. So, for instance, if you have a house, you want to put solar panels on top of your house, there's a provision in the ordinance that says if something is clearly accessory to the principal use, it's allowed. What that would then do is that leaves it to the zoning official to make a case-by-case determination. Is this clearly accessory to the principal use? Where that question becomes, there's a gray area or a difficulty in drawing the line is how many solar panels makes it so that it's no longer clearly accessory. There's no answer in the ordinance for that if you were to repeal this ordinance.
We're still in public hearing, so would make sure everybody's very welcome to come on up. I normally suggest giving priority to those with connections to Tiverton and those who oppose the action being proposed, but it looks like we'll have plenty of time for everybody tonight. So.
Joseph Souza, 49 Hancock Street. So many times I've seen in this town where we put something up, a business comes in, they spend their money, we pull the rug out from under them. We don't want that to happen. I want to first say that farms are a commercial business. They raise a crop, or they raise whatever it is they're raising, cattle, but it's a commercial business. They raise it, they sell it, they can sell it right out of their farm. I visited a friend down in Texas who moved there from Rhode Island. Took me out for a ride, and I saw the big pumps pulling the oil out of the ground. I saw solar panels right next to them, and I saw cattle eating the grass around the panels and goats, and they had to have a special thing on the front of the panels like a fence so the goats didn't go up on top of the panels. But you can still have, you have to, there was a problem with a lot of farms where they were using Roundup to keep the weeds down because as everything grows up, it blocks the solar panels. So they got to keep the ground clear. But the thing now is they're using animals to do that. So you can't have a mix of, having livestock there, as we do here. I mean, goats do a great job at eating around these things. So you're raising goats or sheep or whatever you're raising. So it can be a mix on the farm. And I'm going to say it's become increasingly hard for our farms to stay in existence. And that's why they do things. You'll see them out there. Some of them actually do construction. They do trucking. I remember the Durfees did trucking for years. So he brought in Bill, when I was on the zoning board, he brought in bills of lading where he moved eggs for farmers in the area on his truck. They do what they got to do to survive. We want to preserve our farms. Solar panels, seems like everybody wants green until it comes to their backyard. If you look what they did in Middletown in the industrial park over there, every vacant spot over there, they cleared it and they put in solar panels. We didn't want the wind turbines. We put a moratorium on those and they're stayed. But solar panels, they don't make noise and they're really not an eyesore if they're done. And you have, most of these fields have a line of trees around them anyway. So I don't know. We need to make sure that we do have a good ordinance. But don't think that it's going to be just that the panels are there and there can't be any livestock or anything still moving around them. That's the green way to do it now, so.
No, I understand, Joe. It's just it needs to be balanced and done correctly, that's all.
But if it's helping that farm,
No,
because if that farm closes and they put in 60 houses, you know what that does. We're floating a bond to build a new school.
Right.
Especially in the South End.
I understand, but I do know that there's this sharing and all of that. And
Great.
it can be done right, so I do
And I think you'll get it right.
Yep.
Hi, my name is Michael Sokol, and I am not a resident of the town. I represent a company called Northeast Solar, and we've talked to some folks here in town about something that the state is quite interested in because they've made now a new portion of the solar allotment for sell to the grid and the tariff type, like what you guys are discussing tonight. That's what those projects must be. to do solar carports and/or canopies. It doesn't require normally cutting down any trees. Occasionally, it could be a tree that's causing shading, but it's not cutting down acres and acres of trees. It's going on commercial properties that are already being used for a commercial purpose, and it would bring additional revenue to that business owner, okay? So we're just saying this, you guys are looking at, it seemed like what Mr. DeSisto just said. Is that how you say your name, sir?
No, that's how you say his name.
You can say his name, okay, whatever your name is, sir, I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Perfect.
Yeah, there you go. He's here now. Anyway, the idea, it seemed like he was saying that, commercial use, doing these things in commercial areas is going to go back to what existed. I'm not here to try to influence how you write your ordinance. But I guess I do have that question. It seems that doing this in a commercial place would not necessarily be in opposition to what you folks are looking to do. So is it okay if I ask that question? Can I get a thought from anybody on that?
Well, I'm new to the council, so this has sort of come to my...
Yeah, this is, nobody's making a
But
commitment here tonight, you're
just
having a discussion.
having read the existing ordinance, I think one of the big problems appears to be that there's not very much differentiation at all. So you can have a large solar energy system installed in an R30 zone, which is where we would have our most dense population. And so there's nothing about, I don't think the word farm appears in the ordinance. So there's nothing saying this is to help farmers. So I think that's the issue we're dealing with right now, is this is just, doors open, come on in.
Yeah.
And
I got a bunch of acreage, let's go build a solar farm.
yeah, exactly. So I think those are questions that need to be answered for the next version of the ordinance.
Well, you guys probably already know that a lot of these things were built on actual, real farms, okay? The company I'm working with, they were involved in a number of those things being built, and they were small, what's called a 250 kW quarter megawatt size system, taking less than an acre and normally not cutting down any trees. Now, some people in this room will probably be upset because I just said that. But the fact is, these were real farms, okay? They had some land that was not on the restricted development rights, okay, if you're familiar with that idea. And they were able to use a small piece of land that was not all that useful to them. They weren't growing any food that was going to take something off somebody's table, and be able to utilize it in that format. So just saying to what you just said, Donna, is that your, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read names from a distance.
Is that the right one?
Yeah, I think that's hopefully you, anyway. That, I'm just trying to add something to the conversation by saying it can be done. Certainly it's not as profitable to everybody, but there is a profit point that has to be made. There's costs involved and interconnect charges and a lot of different things involved in this you guys probably don't know a lot about. And so it sounds like you're gonna want to get yourself educated on that so you can make an intelligent decision. I'm not the guy that came here to educate you about that tonight, okay? But I would just say that this idea of the commercial use is what I would personally be interested in. Because, again, we've already signed an agreement with someone to move forward. We want to just have an idea if that's a realistic idea, because it is a commercial property. And I'm going to tell you that in the sense of this particular property, you probably already think it's ugly, and the solar canopy isn't going to make it more ugly, okay? And it might make it prettier, but it won't make it more ugly. So, and we did speak to Mr. Compton about that, and he told us what the process was, and, there's a lot of work to do, okay?
So you're representing one of the projects that's currently in
No,
pipeline?
sir. No, our project hasn't even, written a word on an application yet. Okay? Something else you want to ask me? Okay. Thank you for letting me have a word. Thank you very much.
Just while the next person comes up, and so I know you're settling in, but just a question, do we have to repeal this ordinance today in order for version 2.0 to get cranking? Is that how this process has to be, or could this thing sort of stay alive and then so there's no gap in the middle?
The answer to your question is no. It does not have to be repealed tonight in order to start working on a new version.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that. Sir?
Good evening. My name is Michael Monroe. I'm an attorney. I represent Raymond Johnson and Raylu Realty, LLC, and Cameco Holdings, LLC. who are collectively the owners of property, it's multiple parcels at 691 Brayton Road. As the members of the previous council will remember, I was here around the same time that this solar ordinance was adopted, actually, advocating for a proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance, which would have allowed certain activities on my client's property that ultimately did not succeed. But it's interesting to hear that, that there's apparently some surprise from members of the planning board and members of the council about the proposed size and scope of some of these solar projects, when there were specific comments made during these various planning and town council meetings that my client should consider using his property for solar. As many of you may know, it's an existing gravel pit. There's nothing aesthetically pleasing about it in its current form. It's not one of these farms where people are concerned that it's just going to be trees clear cut in the middle of a field. And it's exactly the type of property that is suitable and appropriate for a large-scale solar development. And we're here tonight objecting to this proposed repeal of the ordinance. I think it would be much more prudent for the council to consider an amendment to the existing ordinance, or consider a proposed new ordinance, as opposed to simply repealing the existing ordinance with nothing else in place, not knowing how long the process will take, and with numerous pending applications at various stages. My client did submit recently, in the last couple of weeks, basically a concept plan application, and is in the process of submitting everything else. And obviously, a repeal could not only affect him, but various other property owners who are in different stages of their proposed solar projects at this point. But I can tell you from my client's perspective, significant monies have already been expended just researching, doing the initial engineering work, and preparing everything that was submitted as part of that concept plan application. So again, I urge you to not repeal this tonight, at least consider it, whether you're going to take that drastic step. And if there is a new proposed solar ordinance, or a simple amendment, which I think could be made that would address these concerns, the council could consider that, and then not simply repeal it without anything to take its place going forward.
So,
Yeah, I just want to, I don't remember, but is that an R40 that Ray owns?
R80.
R80. All right, I just wasn't, okay. All right. So it is.
Mr. President, can I ask? Attorney DeSisto, my understanding from your memo was that, I'm a little confused. If the town council does not repeal the current ordinance and does work on either a new one while the other one's in place, or amendments, it's my understanding from your memo that any projects that then meet the complete filing, everything's in order, will now be able to go forward, because that other ordinance, the first ordinance, is still in place. Is that correct?
That's correct. At the time the application is certified as complete,
Okay.
the regulations in effect at that time govern the application going forward.
Thank you.
So, and I'm going to count on you, don't get me in trouble here. So you're one of the applicants that's pending, but in that not yet complete?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, there's a concept plan package that was submitted that I believe is potentially something that could be on the planning board's January agenda, but hasn't been scheduled yet.
To the extent that you're able to answer, and that Tony lets me ask the question, what kind of, let's assume, just for the sake of our discussion, that the ordinance was repealed, and a new ordinance was forwarded from the planning board, and it was adopted by this body, and I don't know, what does that take, maybe 6 weeks or something like that? Would that harm, if not you, would it harm how much harm would that really be? Because I know you put a lot of work into this, and I'm somewhat sympathetic to the people that have already come in under this ordinance, especially because it's this new ordinance. And I'm just trying to get a realistic sense of, would this just set you back a month or two? And then my second question is, if the planning board, for whatever reason, decides not to forward a new ordinance, let's say we repeal this ordinance, and then they just don't recommend a new ordinance, does this body have the authority to forward the ordinance directly without, or perhaps over the objection of the planning board? Is that?
The statutory scheme is that the ordinance originates with the town council. It goes to the planning board for a recommendation. That recommendation is either, the recommendation is that the ordinance should be adopted, it conforms to the comprehensive plan, or not. But that is a step in between the council having its public hearing on that. So the enactment of the ordinance isn't dependent upon the planning board's actions. They have a statutory duty to make a recommendation. If there is none, the ordinance can still go forward.
If they don't recommend, though, can the council still adopt?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Okay, and then, is anybody comfortable commenting on my first question? And all I'm trying to get at is, because let's assume that we improve the ordinance and it picks, I'm just hypothetically, it picks up the current applicants, it picks up commercial properties, you know, does that just set everybody back a month or two?
I'm sure Mr. Minot will agree that under the fact pattern that you just set forth, there would be no liability for the town.
But just as a business matter, I mean, as a, you don't have to answer my question, I
think a 6-week time frame is probably a generous and overly optimistic view of how long the process is probably going to take. Obviously, members of the council probably know better than I do, but I think it's going to be months and months and months before there's anything new. You could end up with multiple competing solar ordinances, and then the process could take even longer if there's a big fight about which version should be adopted, and it could just tie up people's properties indefinitely until that occurs. And with a lot of these projects where a property owner has signed on with a solar company, they've already agreed to a lease or to option rights with the solar company. So during that time period, there are substantial costs being incurred, and it's time potentially that the landowner isn't using their property for whatever other uses they may have.
Is there seasonality to the installation and the erection of the structures themselves, or is it? I mean, is there like you can't put it in the winter because of frost, or is it you get the approval and you're putting these things in?
Well, I can't really, I'm not an expert on solar design and installation by any means, but I think that's probably dependent on the type of system and who the developer is. But I don't think for my client's property it would be too dependent on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it's more for Mr. DeSisto. So if we were to repeal the ordinance, there's some process that a business like this could follow in order to put in a solar farm, right? Somebody gets some variance from here or something like that, or there would be some way for an individual process to thread the needle and still go into effect, individual project.
The application would be for a use variance, which is a very, very high, almost impossible standard to meet, particularly for an application of this nature.
But quick rundown of what that process would entail.
It'd be a visit to the zoning board, and the standard would be that there is no other beneficial use of the property except for this use. And in the instance of the Johnson property, since it's R80, conceivably it could be used as a residential subdivision, and that's why it's the difficulty going forward in any alternative fashion other than having an amendment to the zoning ordinance which allows for it in the nature that you have now.
So unlike the process of the planning board making a recommendation on an ordinance that we can override and do whatever we want as the council, zoning, is that a hard stop? They reject it? There's nothing the council can do?
That's correct, yes. Okay. The appeal is to Superior Court.
And now how about the particular ordinance that we're considering in the recommendation to repeal? Is that amendable? Could we amend that as we vote on the recommendation to repeal?
Are you talking about amending the ordinance before you? The answer is yes.
Okay.
So, just to follow up on that, and I'll go to the gentleman. So, we have already proper notice to make the amendments now without kicking it back to the planning board?
But my advice consistently over the years to clients is that you have notice for an ordinance in front of you. If you're talking about passing some pieces of it and not the other, that's no notice problem. If you were to substitute language in that doesn't have a nexus for what you have, then there would be a notice issue.
And the issue is more in the nature of open meetings problem or the notice provisions of land use law?
Both.
Both. Okay, thank you. Sir?
Hi, my name's Dan Mulaney. I'm a resident of Tiverton. I'm going to recommend that the council rescind this ordinance until we have an opportunity to really understand the effects that it has on the town. At the same time, respecting the property rights, the rights of the property owners. I think it's important that we have some kind of balance here. The ordinance as it is now is allowing, no, actually, it's not just allowing, it's encouraging these non-resident, dispassionate developers and large corporations to come here and put these industrial-sized complex anywhere in the town, right now. So they're going to collect their checks from afar. They're going to buy the land. They're going to lease it to the developer. They're going to leave. They're going to collect their check. The corporations are going to come in. They're going to collect their government subsidy checks, and we're all going to live with whatever's left over here, which may be a significantly altered landscape and possibly decreased property values. So you want to talk about tax base and whatnot, you have that to consider as well. So I just think at this point right now, this thing is just becoming a magnet. As you can see, this ordinance just happened, and all of a sudden, what's happening? Exactly what I just said. All these dispassionate developers and corporations are being drawn to this like a magnet. So I would recommend that we rescind this, freeze things as they are right now, and then try to work on something that's fair to everyone. And we just talked about capping the dump. Why aren't we encouraging the solar panels there instead of in some of these areas where we're trying to preserve? So thank you. Thank you for your time, and congratulations, folks, to the new members.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the council. My name's Karen Benson, Karen or Jerry Benson, and I represent the Peckham family down in Punkatee's Nest Road. Yes, we were involved in the original development of the ordinance, and I think with the new council, it might be worth putting things into perspective. I opened my file in 2016. I'd happily have my letter of February of 2017 submitted to the record, Ms. Mello, if that's acceptable. And if not, I'll submit it at a later date and ask that the hearing be continued for that purpose. The ordinance was the product of a public process, as Ms. Hilton started to explain. It was triggered by the fact that when my clients asked me to help them come before zoning and submit a request for a building application, there was virtually no way to do that. Now, it's worth noting they have hundreds of acres of land down in the south end. Some of it is actively being farmed in potatoes and other pumpkins, gourds, etc. Some of it is permanently preserved as open space, and some of it, a tiny fraction, let me get the exact amount, single digits, about 6.3% would be developed for ground-mounted and rooftop solar as an auxiliary use of the farm. Now, why are these little details important? Because it goes to what the planning board and what the subcommittee tried to do when they developed the ordinance. The assertion that the ordinance was written by a person with a stake in the outcome is simply misinformed. It's not true, as was also published on a change.org website, since taken down, that someone from some sort of developers organization was involved. It's not true. It's a local multi-generational family that paid me to help the town draft an ordinance that was good for the town. That's what we tried to do. And how we did it was, the planning board formed a subcommittee. And the subcommittee were people who volunteered, who were interested and knew something about it. They were engineers and local land use people and those kinds of folks. My client's a farmer. He attended 0 meetings of the subcommittee. So, fast forward from 2016 to 2017, we finally start having hearings at the planning board. Let's see. July of 2017, I worked with town council. At that time, it was Kelly, I'm sorry, I don't know her last name. Morris. Kelly Morris, a very experienced attorney from up north, but here in Rhode Island, and she helped us with a draft plan. Then we looked to other Rhode Island municipal ordinances. There was some conversation about that tonight. And we had many, many other ordinances that were reviewed, and then we tried to adopt those provisions that were appropriate for this community. My hours devoted many hours to the process. So did the special city solicitor, Ms. Morris's office. So did the planning board. They had multiple hearings. There were multiple closed hearings by the committee, and then they were submitted to the town. We specifically sought to address the issues of clearing land, and we tried to discourage that. We specifically sought to keep farm, forest, and open space open. Public hearings were held on 2/26/18. Why is that important? Because Chris Kearns from the Rhode Island Office of Energy Resources reviewed our ordinance and said it seemed to comply with the state provisions for how to make a decent ordinance that would be flexible, protect landowners' rights, and protect the town, including commercial uses in the town and open spaces in the town. So I have a copy of that where Chris Kearns gives us a red line, 2/26/18. Then we have a hearing in the planning board. And then in March of 2018, we enact the ordinance. So the history is worth knowing here because we did try to do a good job. And to suggest otherwise, well, it's not informed. I would suggest, as I did in my letter of February 22nd, 2018, that the ordinance does comply with our comprehensive plan, and that the ordinance can address our applications right now. Maybe it should be modified, and I think we all anticipated that it would need some modifications as the state and our town grew into this process. But to derail it now, after more than 2 years of work, hard work by lots of people who are in this room, is misguided. I'm sorry about the open space that is damaged or potentially damaged by certain applications, and I don't think it's right. But I think to derail the entire ordinance would be misguided. So I will ask that you maintain the current ordinance, assign a committee, either the planning board or private citizens, to look at what might need to be revised, and let the ordinance remain in place. Thank you.
Mr. President?
I just had one thing I forgot to mention and wanted to follow up on, and I think it's important to distinguish between farmers who want to augment their income, or there's some sort of accessory or whatever it was, however it was termed, versus an obvious industrial energy generating power plant is what we're talking about here. We're not talking about, trying to take some income or some opportunities away from farmers and local people. We want to encourage that, obviously. But these are, a third grader could tell you that some of these projects that are coming in here got nothing to do with residential or farming. They are electrical power plants. They're solar, yes, they're great. We all want solar. I'm a big advocate myself. But I think there's more of a win-win for everyone if we locate these things where they should be located versus just opening the door and say, here, put them anywhere you want. Cut down as many trees as you want, do anything you want to do, just put them anywhere you want. You know, we want to cover fogland, maybe we should lease out Weedamo Woods. We can do that, we can cut that all down, and we can put solar panels in there, and the town can make a lot of money doing that.
Let me just,
So,
I just want to make sure, I want to make sure anybody has at least the first opportunity to speak.
Sure.
And then,
Absolutely.
if that's okay.
Mr. President, I have one quick question, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Attorney DeSisto, thank you, Attorney Benson, for the history that you provided. It reminded me of something I've been meaning to ask. I know Governor Raimondo had this, and I don't know when it was issued, but she has this huge plan for promoting solar and renewable energies in the state in a certain percent by 2020. How much is any of this being driven by the state? Are we getting particular subsidies to do that? You know, what's the state involvement in what Tiverton is deciding to do?
I think the administrator wants to answer it. I'm not aware of anything.
Does the administrator want to answer?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the state has been very, very interested in promoting renewable energy, including solar. And it was mentioned that the Office of State Energy Resources was extremely interested in what Tiverton was doing and looked very closely and was very happy, I think, to see what was being done here. None of that takes away from, you know, the law of unintended consequences that Councilor Hilton was referring to, that things you don't necessarily anticipate may be allowed by the ordinance as it was adopted. And I think there's actually nobody here who suggests that no modifications might be desirable. The question is whether you can maintain some progress towards allowing solar, whether it's because you want to help farmers to stay in business or you want to increase renewable energy for sake of the environment. All kinds of different things, but everybody seems to agree that helping farmers is good. I think few people would disagree that having a solar farm on an already disturbed area like a quarry is probably a very interesting idea, provided it doesn't have other impacts on people living close by, things like that. So there should be ways to do this, whether it has to involve a repeal or rather a more modest modification of the ordinance, I think is sort of the question before you.
Okay, and I guess my question goes one step back. Do we have a choice to do solar, or are we obligated to move forward with some kind of a solar plan by the state in any way? That's my question, I guess.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Unless they pass a statewide application law, or is that?
Yes.
Okay.
This is just, I don't know if this is for the administrator or maybe Ms. Jensen who relinquished the microphone. We are hearing particular uses, you know, a description of a farm with multiple uses where this would be a small component, which sounds good, but somehow we got from that to an ordinance that to my eye looks like just an open door. I mean, the restriction on cutting down trees is if you have to do it, that's the only time you can do it, which seems kind of overly broad to me. So how did we get from this targeted idea we want to help a property like this to, I mean, I think that's the question I have, and that I haven't heard any good answer on who or how that happened. Unless maybe it was the state came in.
I think that truly at the time when this was under consideration, I don't think the town envisioned this kind of rush. And I believe what the planning board was trying to do was to create something that didn't create 1,000 hoops for people to jump through, but didn't envision this enormous rush of applications that, you know, gee, a farm here, a farm there might apply to do this. But again, part of what happened is that, and to go back to Councilor Coulter's point, has the state done anything? Yes and no. My opinion, states like Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, their solar incentives are so much more sophisticated than what Rhode Island has, and their solar incentives drive solar development to exactly the kinds of things that we've been hearing about. Tops of commercial buildings, carport kinds of things, the reuse of brownfields, landfills, old quarries. Their incentives go that way. Rhode Island's incentives are put it wherever you want. So there is, and as other communities started realizing this and closing the door, Tiverton's barn doors are wide open. So that naturally has attracted way more solar developers to come here because we're one of the few communities left where the doors are wide open. But to go back to your question, I think at the time when the planning board was envisioning this, they were thinking, oh, maybe a farm here, maybe a little part of this property. No, this was all brand new. Nobody saw this coming, and here it is.
Good evening. I wanted to thank you for your willingness to revisit Tiverton's solar ordinance this evening. Solar siting has become a contentious... Oh, my name? Julie Monifo. Thank you. I apologize. I grew up in Tiverton, and I presently don't live here. Solar siting has become a contentious debate statewide, and we know that Tiverton went into that debate unprepared for the challenges and unintended consequences that this would bring to the community. Tonight, we have an opportunity to fix that. Everyone can agree that the independently owned solar power plants will be a big change for Tiverton. We should all want to go into that with the best tools available. We will be better stewards of the land if we can direct the largest utility-scale developments towards compromised sites and away from forests, historic properties, and prime farmland that define the rural character of Tiverton. This is not only better for the community, it's better for the very environment that we are trying to protect by bringing green energy to the area. I believe that we need to proactively prioritize where we site these facilities. And some of the people that came up and spoke this evening have some very good ideas about where they should be sited: the quarry, the landfill. The carport was an excellent idea. So by repealing the solar ordinance, we're not trying to stop solar. We're not trying to stop green energy from being responsibly sited within the community. What we're trying to do is take time to consider all the complexities that are new to everyone. All the municipalities in the state are facing the same challenge, and it's unfolding in ways that people weren't expecting it to. There's much more impact than anyone anticipated initially, and that impact is long-lasting. These solar facilities have a shelf life of about 20 years, some of them much longer, but they only guarantee them, I believe it's for 20 years, 25 years. We're talking about permanent changes, cutting down forests that have mature trees in them. With respect to the present solar ordinance, there is something in there that says we should not be putting this in the woodlands, and to put them in open spaces when there is open space available. But that's not happening. We're not really paying attention to the good qualities of the present solar ordinance. And for that reason, I do think we need to revisit that solar ordinance and carefully take what's good about that solar ordinance and bring it forward and make some amendments. Some of the things that I feel could be improved upon, the soil is something that is permitted to be removed from the land. At the same time, the solar ordinance says that you should not do anything to the land that will prevent it from being farmed in the future. I think that's a conflict. I think if the soil is a farm's bank account, and if you remove soil where the arrays are, you're not going to be able to farm that sustainably in the future. Another issue is there is no lot coverage limits. So you could potentially fill a farm from corner to corner with solar arrays, and that is also going to prevent it so that you can't farm that in the future. The way the Division of Agriculture has things outlined presently, if you do mixed farm, as was described in Texas, where you have cows and solar arrays in the same place, that's mixed use, and that is actually a good way to do solar. But that's not defined in our solar ordinance. You're allowed to do wall-to-wall solar arrays on a farm at this time. And mixed use, in the future you can farm it, but if you take the farm status away from a farm, at this point, you can't go back. You can't get that zoning back. And that's the best of my understanding from speaking with the Division of Agriculture this week. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone from the public?
Hi, I'm Ray Fougere, and I live in Tiverton. And all I've been hearing tonight is what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Do it this way, don't do it that way. Do it that way, do it this way. We have open space, we don't have open space. What I'd like to hear from Attorney Benson is, you mentioned that it was going to benefit the town of Tiverton. You said that. Could you explain that?
Well, you don't have to respond, but I will let you if you.
No,
well, let me. Yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
Sure. As Ms. Monifo just said, for example, I'm not prepared to answer your question, but I will. She's quite right. The life of a typical ground mount array is typically 20 years. The leases are typically 20 years. And soil qualities is part of the state rules and guidances, and we could add that to our ordinance, maintaining soil qualities, not removing soil qualities. So collectively, that 20-year plan, 20-year life expectancy of the equipment, and a consideration of soil qualities will allow Jason's young son, yes, my client's young son, to grow up and in 20 years be a farmer. It will allow
And go to Harvard.
Just a moment, sir.
I'm sorry.
I was respectful and
Yes.
rose to the challenge. You could at least let me finish.
You're right.
His
Sorry.
young son could decide to grow up and become a farmer. This is not a commercial operation that I was proposing, that we are proposing. It was to subsidize a farming operation. I understand you feel passionately about this, but you should be informed before you be criticizing.
Okay, no problem. What's a kilowatts?
Sir, I'm not a developer.
They can't do that.
That's okay. Well, let me direct your comments to us. I want to make sure everybody has a
Thank
chance
you,
to
Mr.
speak
President.
that has been heard. And
But you
we
still,
wanna have the debate.
so how would I get an
Throw 'em
answer
at me,
to
Ray.
that?
Throw 'em at me. Throw 'em at me. What
Oh,
are-
sorry.
what are the
Oh, I'm
questions?
sorry, Mr. President.
Yeah, no, I just, you know.
Okay.
I'll feel it.
I'd like Attorney Benson to explain, as she did, how that benefits the town. I'm a taxpayer in town, and I also have a certain appreciation for the aesthetic appeal of the town. And if I'm not benefiting from their solar plant, but I want to take a drive in the country, and I see the solar plant in my front, in my view, in my rear view mirror, where's my benefit?
Well, I don't know, I actually had the question on my list about how tax credits or abatements or exemptions play into this, so I was saving that question. I don't know if you'd permit a detour into that at the time. And I do think there's something to be said that, for property rights, I mean, I think
Yeah,
that's
oh,
part of the
absolutely.
argument, that
Yeah,
it isn't necessarily, is it our right for us to ask what that benefit is if it's their land, but who can I put on the spot to talk to me about tax exemptions? So, right, farms have some kind of tax, right? So, I mean, I think it's fair to say the solar industry itself is subsidized not by the town of Tiverton, right? So just stop me if I have this wrong, but by state or perhaps federal authorities.
It's
But
subsidized by the federal.
is there, are solar installations receiving some kind of a tax credit from Tiverton?
I can answer that.
take a shot and then tell me if I'm wrong.
Okay, so straight off the bat, for the installation, there's a 30% investment tax credit. So that means if it costs $10 million, immediately the landowner gets to deduct from his taxes 30% of the installation cost, which would be $3.3 million.
That's federal.
That's federal.
Okay.
That's federal. Now, it's the landowner. It's not the installer, it's the landowner gets that. Is that correct?
Let me put Tony on the spot
Mr.
first.
President,
And
before we go on-
I don't want you to feel that you're obligated
I'm
to
not-
respond
no, I'm
at
fine,
all.
I'm fine.
And I don't.
I'm trained to do this.
I get it. So
will
am I.
ask that my letter of February 22nd,
On the record.
2018
It's on the record.
be submitted as a full exhibit. It addresses many of these issues.
You got it. You got it. Jump in if you'd like.
Okay, I'm not the tax assessor, so I'm not entirely certain, but I can tell you that the arrays are taxed as tangible property at a certain percentage. Whatever that percentage is, I don't know. One of the benefits to a town is whether or not they would be the offloader of the tax credits, the energy credits. And I don't know if these projects have that component where the town gets to buy the credits and therefore the energy costs for the town go down. I'm not sure about that. Those are the typical benefits that a municipality gets.
There's, in addition to that, there's depreciation. And there's credits for depreciation.
Those are federal.
Those are federal.
To income tax.
There's an income tax. Now, there's also a tax credit for production. So there's a certain amount of benefits to owning a solar array. And it's huge. It's huge. Now, $3.5 million in tax credits, I'm sure that they'll never use. I'm sure. However, the government, the federal government, allows you to sell those tax credits. In fact, there's an open market for tax credits. You can actually sell those. So, are we talking here about producing solar energy, or are we talking about producing tax credits that are saleable? And it goes on and on and on and on until for the life of the plant. And it's my feeling that the town, if that's the case, that the town should participate in some of that.
Thank you.
Okay, who hasn't had the chance to speak yet, particularly those in opposition?
1 second, please, just to make a recommendation through the solicitor, that you keep the ordinance in place, but ban future moratorium on future applications.
That's what we're doing now.
That's a suggestion, if the solicitor thinks, that way,
Do it, right?
I think this town has done that in the past.
Tony, isn't that what the repeal is, though? That the ones that are in there incomplete can go forward, but nobody else can put any
To avoid the
further
lawsuits.
applications?
To avoid the
That's correct.
lawsuits.
This
That's
isn't a-
what's going on right now.
This ordinance isn't a candidate for a moratorium.
It's not a moratorium per se, but it sort of operates as one.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Well, but can't go back in time.
Correct.
Okay. Who hasn't had the chance to speak?
Well, on that note, if I could just jump in real quick. So the planner told us earlier that there are 3 that are in the master planning process that, barring errors, will be approved. 1 has been approved, 2 will be if there are no errors. There's 1 project in concept plan review in December, and then 2 that may come before us if there's no repeal of this. The quarry that we heard of earlier is in which of those categories?
I don't think they've...
I think the attorney said that it was in the concept stage and they'd be going in front of the planning board for a concept plan review.
So it's not one of these 6?
No, it is one of the 6, and it would be scheduled for the January agenda at the soonest. It is one of those.
So it's one of those two.
Right, so there's one project where the master plan has been approved. The next step is the preliminary plan submittal. That's where all the really detailed engineering, et cetera, is done. So we frankly don't expect that to be submitted for another few months because that takes the most time, but it falls under the existing ordinance. We have a second application where the first public information hearing for the master plan process, so therefore the master plan has been certified complete and accepted, it falls under the current ordinance. We have a third project where the master plan has been submitted, but it's not yet been reviewed and certified complete. However, since it was submitted on November 20th, if it is certified complete within the next 25 days, then it would fall under the existing ordinance. Then the three that are after that, there's one that's on the agenda for December 4th for a concept plan review. Concept plan submittals aren't certified as complete because the planning board takes no action on them. It's just a review, possible comment, feedback to the applicant, that type of thing. There are two additional applications that could come before the planning board in January as concept plan review, and one of those is the one that's at the quarry site.
And would I be interested to know the one that you have the scheduled concept plan review and the other one that you have an application that hasn't been scheduled yet for review, the nature of those, what are those? Can you give me a quick summary of, are they quarries, are they brownfields, are they cutting down a bunch of trees?
I don't have, quite frankly, we've been so busy, I have not had a chance to review them yet. I do have the plans in my office, and I'd invite you to come by sometime, any member of the council, and we could look at them, but I can tell you they're not on brownfields or quarry sites. But that.
Rob, can I ask a question?
Yeah, but just something. Yeah.
So out of these 6, only 3 are complete and ready to go. In a way, but they're complete, so we cannot do anything about those 3, the top 3 you mentioned.
No, they're not.
That's what I'm asking.
One, the master plan's been approved.
Okay.
Actually, 2 of the master plans have been approved. One, a master plan decision has been written, so it's, the master plan itself has been approved. The other one, the master plan, has been accepted as complete and is in the review process before the planning board.
So we can't stop that one because you have accepted as complete.
Correct.
So there's 3.
Yeah.
The third one, we have accepted the application. It has not been certified as complete yet.
Because of the 25 day, but
Right,
it can't be because of the 25 days.
Right, because it came in right before the holidays and we've not had time to review it. And quite honestly, my plan, because of the nature of the application and sort of the scrutiny with the public, is I've arranged with the planning board solicitor to meet with me to go over it and just to make sure that we don't miss anything.
But the applicant has 25 days where you can say it's complete, and if you do, that one will go forward because it was
Correct,
submitted.
that's correct.
Okay, so there's actually 3 then?
Yeah. 3.
Okay. I just wanted to make
Yeah, 3 and 3 that.
And the other 3 will not go forward right at this moment?
Unless the council decides not to repeal the ordinance. In which case, those 3 and any other application that would come in until the ordinance could be amended would be governed under the existing ordinance. But I would defer to Mr. DeSisto to confirm that.
And if I may, and just to point out, just because a project has master plan approval, that doesn't mean it's got final approval. There's still a considerable process that has to happen at the planning board level with preliminary plan approval and final plan approval. And the planning board has to make certain findings that are required by law. So it means these will continue along in the process, but it does not mean that they are approved final applications.
And if I might, in addition to the planning board approval, almost all of these projects at some level or another where it's very minimal stormwater management to other environmental impacts will require Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management approval as well. So there's, and the town fire marshal, that there's quite a bit of eyes on these. They have to look at any master plan or any major development, whether it be residential, solar, commercial. It gets a considerable amount of scrutiny. And conservation. And historic.
Can I just get a sense of how many people think they would like to be heard after Mrs. Anderson? Okay. And I want to make sure, Attorney, that you have another opportunity to respond if you choose to. Go ahead.
Susan, sorry, Susan Anderson. There's one thing that nobody has brought up, and that has been brought up at planning board meetings, especially the last one, which is one of the ones that was a concept plan on Brighton Road that was that's 101 acres, and that was what is the capacity for National Grid. National Grid's told the town that they are not going to put in any more infrastructure. So what we have is what they have, and I'm concerned that if the planning board approves all these private solar farms, that when the town caps the landfill and wants to put our own solar panels on the landfill, which it should be, and on top of municipal buildings, which it should be, for our electrical purposes, that we won't be able to because of all these private solar developments taking up all the capacity that National Grid has. So that's one thing that really you should take into consideration that should be in the solar ordinance somewhere, is what is the capacity that these developments have to have that National Grid can accept. Because I'm really concerned that if the town wants to do something, we won't be able to because of all these other private ones. And we're not getting any of the electricity that's generated by any of these farms. These are huge farms. Some of them are really huge. And I'm really concerned that they're just for the private development. They're not for the town. Town's not getting anything from them. The applications that I have attended all these planning board meetings that has the solar developments, and I don't remember any of them including helping a farm. There's a 300-year-old working farm. It is still a working farm. The solar development is taking the whole thing. They're not even considering, they're taking all the land that's currently being farmed now and just replacing it with solar panels. So that's not helping the farmer. You know, there's all these others are cutting down trees. They're not helping the farm. The Peckhams, that's a very good thing, where the farmer is actually going to use the solar for himself to help him. I don't have any problem with that. But to have the working farm just be usurped by solar panels that aren't helping the farmer itself doesn't work. The other thing I want to bring up is that the current solar ordinance does not have the recommendations that the Historical Preservation Advisory Board requested, and that is that no historic properties in town shall have solar panels because of the historic nature of the buildings and the sites. And that was not put in. I don't know why. I made that request. We had written a request to the committee at the time, but it never got in. So that's one thing that I would like to also mention, that we have a lot of historic properties in town, and solar is not what you want to see on a historic site.
Ms. Anderson, I have a couple questions. You cited a property on Brayton Road. Is that one of the 6 that are
Yep.
currently in the pipeline? Which one?
Yep, that's one of the 6.
Okay, is that the quarry, or is that a different?
No,
one?
no.
Is it one of the 3 that's?
Yes.
So that seems like it's,
No, it hasn't been approved yet.
but it's,
The master plan has been put forth, but it's not been approved.
and you mentioned a working farm?
Yep.
Which one is that?
That's
Do you know?
Wingover Farm.
And that's one of the 3?
Yes.
That's
That's
already
the
got-
300-year-old.
But that's one of the 3 that's already in the master plan process?
Unfortunately, yes.
They sold.
Denise, did you want to?
No, not right this moment.
Well, let me, I'm gonna throw something out there, and I want everybody to beat it up. So, so what, how do we get, all right, so what if, so the questions I always ask are, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And I think this is how I kind of think of all agenda items at all of these meetings. What is the problem we're trying to solve, and who's got a solution, right? And I think it's pretty clear to me anyway that there is a problem. And I think even the advocates would suggest there need to be some tweaks, and I think they just don't want to be harmed in the process. Frankly, what I haven't heard yet is somebody come up with the actual solution. And by that I mean, here's the amendments I recommend. And it sounds like they could have come from the planning board, they could have come from the council, they could have come from any single one of, any of us could have come in and said tonight, here's an amendment that we think, apparently we have the authority, unless we're too far astray of the agenda, to adopt tonight. And so what I'm wondering, just for the baseline of discussion, and everybody can kind of punch at this, is what if the council did not repeal the ordinance, or somehow left the matter open, and we're ready to hear a suggested amendment that could actually be voted on? And you won't hurt my feelings if you tell me that's the worst idea ever, but I'm just trying to figure out where would we go from here?
This matter is down for a repeal.
Yeah.
If you were only going to repeal parts of it, that'd be fine.
Right.
If you're going to make additions, that would require notice and have to go through the process.
And the type of edits that I'm hearing some consensus are not just takeaways, they're additions, is that fair to say?
Yes.
And what is the light speed process to put additions? And I mean, not like the usual Tiverton, I mean like, if this really, if we requested the planning board or a special committee, which I think you're saying we could do, to sort of get on this, what are we talking about?
Mr. President, my understanding is that we don't need we don't actually need to go to the planning board if we don't want to. If we wanted to make an amendment and we're only precluded from doing so because it would be outside of open meetings for this purpose.
You need, under the enabling, under the zoning enabling act, what you would need to do would be to have some language that could be advertised for the zoning ordinance amendment. Your time limit is governed by that. That's, Nancy, that's 3 weeks of advertising. So you need to have the language first, before you can have the advertisement set it down for the public hearing.
Mr. President, may I ask a question? I'm just curious, are we closing the public hearing, or I wasn't sure based on what you were saying?
Leave it open unless, does anybody have an objection? Just keep going here. Well, I think we have to take some tough votes here. I'm hoping we do it at 9:45, but has everybody from the public had a chance to be heard that wants to be heard? At least once, okay. Let me just ask, Councilor, did you want to comment first?
I mean, I have some comments, but I'm a little thrown by, are we finishing the public, letting everybody in, making sure that I've heard everything that's coming from the public before? Do I have comments? Yes, but I'd like to give everybody a chance to speak before I...
This may not be the best idea, but my preference is to leave the public hearing open as long as absolutely possible so that we continue to have the chance to be informed. But at some point, we'll have to close it, and then we'll have to take our votes. But for now, ma'am?
Hi, Lark Rodricks. I just wanted to say before you do take the vote that we're going to have to live with this for a long time. These are going to be looked at for 20 years. And so for you to try to get it right and adapt it is probably, you're going to end up with things that weren't thought of and well planned. And even though it started to be, the process was thought of, but then there's all these problems that have risen up that we didn't know were going to happen. And before you knock down a 300-year-old historic house to put solar in, or trees, I think that, you know, it's really out of just respect for what it is, that you really need to think about that, because it's easy to make it pass through so that nobody has to wait, but then you have to look at it, and, you know, you'll have to realize that your decision, you can see what's happening. You can see how fast they're coming in, and people are trying to get in under the wire, and that's why you're being flooded right now. So my thought is, if you just take a breath, and people do have to wait so that we get it right, so that farmers can do it in small areas and not huge, the lot coverage of 100% on a 60-acre, 300-year-old farm, I mean, you can see what's happening, and it's not pretty. So I just wanted to say, you know, 2 weeks to make a decision, or for someone to wait 2 months for something that's going to last 20 years is not a lot. Thank you.
Richard Rahm. I'm a resident. I went to the planning board meeting last week, and they were discussing the Brayton site. And that's very close to where I live, and I have well water. And one question that they struggled to answer came very late in the meeting, was what happens when these panels get damaged by a hurricane and they're left sitting on the ground? What metals are leaching into the ground? And they really weren't able to answer that. And I was very concerned with that. And it kind of ties into what I see here. It appears we've taken a step. There's a lot of unintended consequences. You're right that we have a well-defined problem, but no well-defined solution. And if you have a well-defined problem, you need to take a step back, and that step back is to repeal it. Just repeal it. That doesn't mean you've lost all your work. You still have all that work. You can bring forward a much better ordinance based upon what you already know. But if I was sitting in your seat, the first thing that I'm thinking is slam the brakes on. Just repeal this. That's a prudent move. Thank you.
Okay.
Hold on, Mr. Quick question. The property on Brayton, is that the quarry or is that a different one?
It's a different one.
That's a different one. The property, the quarry is also on Brayton, and that where you may be getting a little confusion. But it was, I think it was Ms. DiMaderis. That was a great idea. How do you formulate a new ordinance that would target distressed properties for this type of, there's also the quarry on Fish. Thank you. Again, that's it's not necessarily an eyesore because it's back, but I bet that would be just a terrific place to put something like this. Thanks.
Okay, does anybody else want to be heard that hasn't been heard? Okay.
Just a short thing, Ruth Hollenbach, I live in Tiverton. And if you do want new input, you could maybe get someone from a town where it's successfully being done, or get some experts in to actually guide us a little bit on it. That's just a short suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, second rounds will be very brief, I hope. Is that?
Just a point of fact.
Just kidding, Rick.
So you feel like you're under pressure? The investment tax credits start to run out on December 31st, 2019. So you have to have your plant up and running by that date to capture the maximum benefit of the tax credits.
Thank you.
Ma'am, did you need any more time, or are you, no pressure? I just want to make sure you have it.
I guess I just want to make sure everyone's read the ordinance, because there have been a lot of comments tonight that made me think that maybe they haven't. So as to the hazardous materials, we have a requirement in the ordinance now, for example, that there'll be material safety data sheets, which is everything that's on the site, including the components of the glass. With regard to breaking down the system, the owners, if they fail to remove the system, they can be called before the town within 150 days if they don't abandon it properly, and they can call a surety. A surety is a form of a bond. In other words, in my client's case, he wouldn't be able to get a bond. He'd have to put up his own money for 20 years, so that later on, if something went wrong, the money would be in hands of the town to make sure it was properly decommissioned. So without restating the obvious, I hope everyone has read it and that they understand what certain words mean, like shall. When we say shall in an ordinance, it's not optional. It means you must. So let's go to the part about land clearing. Land clearing, soil erosion and habitat impacts, clearing of natural vegetation shall be limited to what is necessary for construction, operation, and maintenance. And then, as some people who have spoken tonight, I think agree, all of the other protections from whether it's stormwater runoff, that's RIDEM, or other surface water protections, all of our town and state authorities will be able to weigh in on that to make sure that we don't harm the environment by the installation of a solar farm. Well, I'm not going to read from the ordinance. I recommend that everyone please read the ordinance and consider what the words mean and get the very excellent opinion of town council if they're not sure what it means. Thank you.
Okay, so, Tony, if we close the open hearing, can we reopen it, or we're done? Do I have the authority to reopen a public hearing after we close it?
After a vote of the council.
With the vote of the council? Majority vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
I just want to tag on to what she just said. It does say that clearing of natural vegetation shall be limited to what is necessary for the construction, operation, and maintenance of the solar energy system. Well, the way these solar developers are saying, well, we need the whole farm. And that's what they're saying. We need this much property for us to do our solar panels. On Winkover Farm, somebody had said, well, you've got these historic stone walls. Okay, so they redesigned to incorporate the stone walls, and we redesigned their solar panels so that they don't affect the stone walls. But now they're going to take down the 300-year-old house. Well, we need that we can't do it any other way. So they are reading this, but they're doing their own interpretation of it, saying, oh, we need the whole thing. That's why Julie was saying we need to have some kind of a lot coverage, like we do for any kind of a plan, any kind of a building that comes before the planning board. It just needs to be incorporated because they are interpreting it wrong. I know what you want, and I know what it should be, but they're interpreting it wrong.
Please.
No. I mean, I didn't mean you, but I meant, this is what they were interpreting it wrong.
Well, let's let Mr. Dennis, he's a first-time speaker, I think, so we're going to let him, and I think we're going to maybe have to take the votes here.
Hi, Roger Bennis. I'm a Tiverton resident, and we've all heard a lot of good things and a lot of bad things. And in order to avoid making the same errors that were made when this original ordinance was drafted, I believe what's really necessary is for somebody to tabulate all the good things, all the bad things, all the things that are both good and bad, and all of the good things that could go bad, and make them up in a list, because unless you have a photographic memory, neither the council nor the other people working on the ordinance are going to remember all of this stuff without a checklist. And I think a checklist is what's really needed to go over the ordinance when somebody corrects things, and then the checklist itself will point out what needs to be rewritten in order to correct it. Thank you.
Okay. Second call for any first-time speakers. Any objection to closing the public hearing?
No.
Okay, hearing none, we will close the public hearing. It can be reopened, a majority vote. And Tricia, would you like the floor, or would anybody like to take it from here?
Actually, the public hearings, I'm going to start right off, and I'm going to make a motion that we repeal this ordinance in its entirety. And then if there's a second.
Second.
Discussion or.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. We have a live motion on the floor.
And
some kind of protocol, like allow you to speak onto it, and then we would give speaking priority to those that want to speak in opposition to the council. So go for it.
Okay. I think that we should repeal this. I think there are enough problems with this ordinance that it's, and it's got some really good stuff in it. We don't have to throw it out and start all over. There's a lot that's really good here, but there are enough problems that the best thing to do, I think, is to put the brakes on this and to go back to the drawing board, not completely with a blank piece of paper, and look at what needs to be done to address the issues. I don't think it's something that's going to take forever in a day, in part because there's more help for us out there in drafting this or amending this than there was before. DEM, Farm Forest Owned Open Space, has come up with a set of guidelines for solar on farm properties, which includes things like a limit to the percentage amount of solar versus how much they're actually farming. Not that we have to adopt these wholesale, but they're there. The Rhode Island Office of Energy Resources just finished, after months and months and months, their draft municipal ordinance, which they're not forcing on anybody, but it's there if we want to look at. Additionally, there are any number of communities out of the state, and actually the town I grew up in is one of them, the town of Barnstable, which has got a very good solar ordinance. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel and start from scratch here. I would strongly recommend that we turn that process over to the planning board. You know, the thing about zoning is that it really is about the law of unintended consequences. So for us to sit here and think that we can sort of cherry pick through this and we'll patch this and we'll patch that, without really having the kind of background in zoning and the experience that you need to do this, it's just as likely that we will make an even bigger mess out of what is already here. I am sympathetic to those who are ready to go forward, but I don't think that the wait has to be terribly long. I think there's enough of this kind of work that's already done, plus the good base that we have, that the planning board should be able to turn around something for us relatively quickly that we can go back out to advertising with and get a new ordinance in place. That's my recommendation.
Rob.
Would anybody like to, go ahead, your second, sorry.
Yeah, all I want to say is this memo from the planning board dated October 10th, 2018, they have adopted a solar energy ordinance committee. It's right here, so they can work on this. And this may be a way to expedite it because they do have a subcommittee of the planning board now that's going to work entirely on that.
Do you know, I'm sorry, do you know who's on it? Like,
I don't, Donna, but I'm sure that Stu could tell us because it's already adopted, I think. So I don't see anyone here from, I think Rosemary left. Yeah, but we can definitely inquire about that.
Yes, I was wondering if we could have representation from this, the different entities, historic preservation, and some open space and
we could always
conservation,
make that.
and try to get it right.
We could always make that recommendation that we would like to see those committees on this. We could
Yeah.
all. we
It's
could
not
make-
to stop solar, it's just that
Right.
we'd like
We
it
could
to be
make that
done
recommendation
correctly.
to the planning
Yeah.
board that they may want to add those
All right,
committees.
thank you.
Can someone remind me, the planning board, do we make recommendations to the planning board, or can we instruct as a reporting relationship directly to this body with the planning board?
We can do.
In the sense that we would ask them to make this a priority on their very busy docket.
You could make the request, yes.
Okay. And then, is there anybody on the council that wishes to speak in opposition to the live motion on the floor? The live motion is a motion to repeal, speaking priority to those who want to speak in opposition. Okay, the floor is open. Any other comments? Nancy?
I would agree with Patricia's motion to repeal. The one thing I would like to, if we can make this request to the planning board, to be very specific, to include a lot of the issues that were brought up tonight, sort of the way Roger Bennis suggested. And one of the things that came up at the very end by Richard Rahm, I've been concerned about, and that is the decommissioning process. And because there are hazardous materials in these panels, and if they aren't removed or disposed of properly, there's a lot of danger that can happen to the soil. So I just think we need to be very specific in the kinds of things we really want the subcommittee to address based on some of the concerns we heard tonight.
Do we agree that the Solar Energy Ordinance Committee is an open meeting body?
Yes.
It's a formally convened?
I think it has to be, right, Tony? It has to, they have to have open meetings.
It looks like a pretty formal body, but.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about that. I have to see how they enacted it.
Yeah. Okay, and then, so let's say that we pass this motion to repeal, and we're all hoping the planning board, which I'm sure it will, does good and prompt work. In case they got too busy, what you're telling us is that we could still then put an ordinance back on this agenda. We may have to send it back for recommendation and back, but we could bring this matter up ourselves.
Yes.
And so for anybody in the public that is unhappy with the repeal that and didn't see the progress by the planning board, because it looks like, you know, they have a committee in place, or for whatever reason it wasn't an open body, or you could come and propose it directly to us. And maybe my 2 weeks was a little too ambitious, but I think it doesn't need to take a year. You know, I don't know what the right number is, you know, 4 to 8 to 12 weeks. I mean, if this is a priority, and I think it is a priority because here it is in our first agenda meeting.
But we would have to advertise it, right, Nancy? We would have to have so many days to advertise it once.
3 weeks.
Okay. So keep that in mind.
Substantial language and
Yes.
advertising and everything. It's not a next month project.
No, it's a
Was
January.
the vote of the planning board was unanimous, do we know?
The next planning board meeting
Oh,
is
it was the
December
vote.
5th, and the agenda is, or the 4th, the agenda is
To repeal? To repeal?
already posted.
I'm just
So
curious.
it's not going to happen in December, unless they have special meetings.
It doesn't say here what the vote was. It just said it was voted.
The floor is still open. Any other discussion?
Mr. President, I wanted to know if anybody can put some kind of a somewhat authoritative number on the capacity of Natural Grid to accept these kind of projects. Do we have that number?
We don't have that number, but everyone who comes up with a project and a proposal first has to do that kind of study, you know, what the interconnection is like, what the options are. So they have to work with National Grid to make sure that they know whether or not the capacity is there.
But we have no...
It's not something that the town necessarily gets involved in. The question was raised whether that can ultimately affect whether the town wants to do its own project on the landfill, for example, and that could be the case. But it's basically very difficult to predict because National Grid could decide to say, well, if developers want to pay for the additional capacity, we have no problem with that. I think it's very reluctant to take it on itself right now.
I know there was a wind farm on the other side of the state that they actually went to the General Assembly and tried to get ratepayers to subsidize the addition. So, but we have no sense at this moment whether National Grid's saying we can only do another 1,000 kilowatt hours and we have 200 on the table already, and so we don't.
No, I think it's fair to say that the capacity of the existing feeder lines is limited.
Right.
And so there is that issue, which is, what the competing entities need to deal with.
And I have a question for Mr. DeSisto. With the understanding that for amendments to occur of this nature, we'd have to give 3 weeks' notice, and et cetera. Can you envision that an amendment were we to repeal what's on the table now, and then amend the repeal or put in a new quick ordinance that would let the 3 or some select group of the 3 that are not in master plan approval but are on the table with applications, like an expedited, so I'm thinking of in particular the quarry. Is there an expedited way to, before we have the whole new solar ordinance, to say this project or these 3 as a category, because they have applications in, can be accepted under the prior rules that were just repealed? Is that legally feasible in your opinion?
You have to be concerned with the spot zoning issue, but certainly some elements of the ordinance which you're repealing now could be reintroduced to meet those goals.
But there would be no problem with saying that these 3 defined projects this applies to just them, rather than.
I do view that as an issue.
So it would be an issue.
Correct.
Okay.
It'd be a liability issue for the town because it would appear as though, you're, it's for lack of a better term, it's a due process issue. You've said you guys can go, but the rest of you can't. So, lawsuit.
And that's not something we could amend this repeal to say repealed with an exception for because of the open meetings problems that we have.
I think it'd be better if you from a procedural standpoint, if you repealed and then took a quick look and reviewed what you'd be putting in and reintroduced it as a new ordinance.
But then we run into the issue if we say that the 3 applications that are on the table already are kind of grandfathered in. Would that be an ordinance that we could then pass? Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I don't think you can grandfather them in.
Okay.
But there's a hope that the hard work that the applicants that started but didn't quite get the whole checklist done, I would think that work could be reutilized.
That's correct, yes.
Hope.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Denise, for putting this on the agenda tonight. Yeah.
I had no choice, we advertised it.
Thank you, Donna.
Mr. President, I just want to make one more point that nobody's mentioned, and speaking to this idea of this having become a magnet for the state. It seems to me, if we were to say, you know what, we're not going to repeal it, but we're going to rush real hard to fix it, that only ramps up the amount of magnet effect that you have for people to get in while we're trying to do this process. So for me, that's an overarching concern on a piece of legislation that is really, really broad. And it says things like you can only knock down trees if you have to, but who defines that? You have to list what hazardous materials you have and maybe have a plan, but what does that mean, and who accepts the plan? And that's a lot of concern for me. And I just don't see any way out of this mess without just repealing the thing altogether right now.
Okay. Do we have is it fair to say the sense of the council would be to respectfully request the planning board prioritize a reconsideration? Is there any objection to that being reflected in the minutes?
No, I don't think so, but they do say at the end of their letter, the planning board is concerned that the revision process be expeditious and results in timely recommendations to that council. So I think we can add that, but I think that they are already aware that they would like to make this a priority.
Okay. Joe, you've got a lot to say tonight. Is there any objection to closing debate? Any amendments or rescissions? Second call. Okay, we have before us a live motion and a second to repeal zoning ordinance Article 24 on the solar photovoltaic system developments. We've had a very lengthy open hearing, and at this time I would ask all those in favor to please say aye of repealing the ordinance.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Was that seven?
Unanimous.
Okay. I'd like to, again, thank everybody for their hard work on this difficult issue, and I encourage everybody to stay involved and make sure that the amendment process does happen. And I will personally see to it that that gets back on this agenda, perhaps every third meeting or so. Okay? All right, thank you. We have a very large number of licenses to go through, and what I'd like to do is ask if the clerk and the solicitor let me do this. I'd like to prioritize the license requests for anybody that is here to speak on their matter. And then my question to Nancy and Tony is I remember from being on the council years ago that the world doesn't come to an end on December 1st. They would still continue to, if we don't reach these tonight, if we stop this meeting at 10? Or does this have to happen tonight?
No, it's not going to come to a stop because we have the documentation. But, Mr. President, I do want to make mention that there are also some licenses that we have documentation to that are not put on this, so they're not going to go on till the December 10th meeting, but we're not going to stop any process on them. We have documentation. One in particular is with Twin Rivers Entertainment License.
Right, okay.
The clerk didn't put it on here, but it is. So there's about 10 of them, I believe.
Okay, so let me do this. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to be heard on any of the 150 or more licenses? I'm serious. For those of you that have sat here for 3 hours, okay, if I'm allowed to do this, please let me know which one it is, and then I'll ask the council to see if they'll take it out of order.
Mr. President, Class BC for the casino.
Okay, is there any objection to the council taking the Class BC licenses out of order? I think that's number 27.
I'll make a motion to take it out of order.
Okay, may I have a second, please?
Second? I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any objection to moving that out of order? Can I claim it, or you want to see a vote on everything?
Yeah.
I think it's best if you take
All
the
those in
vote.
favor? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
We're going to take number 27 out of order, though. All right, 7-0. Thank you. Okay. Who wants to own all these? Nancy?
Now, this you have to do as a public hearing.
Okay, we have an open public hearing on the Class BC license for Twin River. That's Tiverton Limited Liability Company, doing business as the Tiverton Casino Hotel. $2,500, is that the license fee?
Yes.
Okay. Is it the highest one on the list?
Yes.
All right. Is it high enough? Just kidding.
It
Just
usually
kidding.
is.
Just kidding. Is this an existing license that's just being renewed?
Yes.
Mr. President, thank you. We were so close to getting taken out of turn before solar, but we missed out. We believe the application for renewal is in order. If there's questions, and then as the clerk pointed out, our application package included not only the BC, but our entertainment, the victualling, the petroleum, tobacco, and holiday. So I guess those will get put on for December, was it 10th, Nancy? Okay. But those were submitted as well.
Okay.
And like I said, if there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
All right, so this is a full-blown live open hearing, and the floor is open. Priority given to those that would like to speak in opposition to the renewal, if any. Second call. Okay. Hearing none, close the public hearing part of this. May I have a motion to renew the Class BC casino license as stated on the agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Joe? Any discussion? Any objection to vote? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Motion to
Any opposed?
Please open.
Thank you.
Because this
Sorry to
is
make you
the
wait.
whole
No problem, thank you.
This is a segment.
You too. Take care.
You'll be back in the town?
Yes.
Is it necessary for him to come back?
There will be debating oil farms, I think.
Is it necessary for you to come back?
Because the rest are not. going to be? Oh, I guess
I'm sorry.
entertainment will be public hearing.
Yeah, the entertainment will be there.
He ought to come back.
We like to see him.
You can put some solar ordinances on.
Yeah, no, we'd be happy to participate.
Not really help. Okay, is there anyone else from the public that'd like to be heard on any of the myriad licenses that are on the agenda?
The flea market is here.
You're not required to speak, but if you'd like to speak. Okay, well, let's do that. Where, can you help me find?
Yeah, it's, yeah, the flea market is 11. It's in the back, yeah.
Second to last one.
Where are we going?
Under holiday license renewals.
And under antique.
Ramco, and under firework
Number 11.
license renewals.
Antique. Oh,
Okay,
no, I'm sorry, you're right.
Nancy, Tony, can we approve, if there's no objection, all within the category? So that would be all 8 firework license renewals, if we want to.
Yes.
This is antique.
Yeah, you just have to say them out loud so people.
Yes.
It's not fireworks?
No. It's a flea market. Antique license.
I apologize. Okay.
It's antiques.
All right. May I have a motion?
It's just completely separate. It's its own thing. Yes. Number 11. It's just its own thing.
Mr. President, may I make a suggestion?
Please.
On this? It is a public hearing. The licenses were issued on, listed on the agenda. What you may want to do is bundle them. For instance, subsection A, junkyard and secondhand dealer licenses. Ask if there's anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on any of them, or are there any members of the council that would wish to take off any one of those 7 to discuss them? If not, the vote can be in a bundle.
Now, Tony, we have to name these out loud, though, correct? So people know what we're talking about. If they don't have, we have to read each one. That's what you told me last time.
Grudgingly, yes. Grudgingly, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I had to do it.
Let's get it done. So, I'm not hearing that anybody wants to speak, so let's just take it from the top. Because you're not going to let me acclaim moving things around the agenda. That's even more votes. So we're on
Junkyard.
item C1. This is
I think you're on junkyards, right? A?
Yeah, well, I'm on the big C here.
Oh,
The council
okay.
sitting as a board of licensing.
You're at C1A.
C1A, junkyard and secondhand dealer license renewals. Subject, this is very important, subject to meeting all legal requirements. Number 1, Arnold's Auto Parts. Number 2, General Auto Recycling, Inc. Number 3, Legacy Salvage Yard. Number 4, Sanford and Son Limited. Number 5, Tiverton Auto Parts, Inc. That would be at 533 Bogelmarsh. Separately, number 6, Tiverton Auto Parts, Inc. at 541 Bogelmarsh. And number 7 would be Secondant Recycling. Is there any objection to taking these all together? Hearing none, is there any objection to proceeding to a vote? Hearing none, may I have a motion for all 7?
I make a motion for all 7.
I think Tricia's got the primary. Can you do the second?
Okay, I'll do the
All right.
second. Okay.
All those in favor?
Bingo.
Now on number C1B, liquor license renewals, December 1st, 2018 and November 30, 2019, subject to meeting all legal requirements. Class A liquor stores, this would be Chandni Incorporated, Nimraj, I gave you this for a reason, Shaitom, I purposely mispronounced it. Can I keep going, or is that a?
Just those 3 that was in that batch.
Those 3.
To be renewed. Is there anybody who would like to speak on these matters? Without any objection, what was the language? May I have a motion to accept these renewals?
I'll make it. Second.
And that motion was subject to all legal
requirements, yes.
requirements? Yes, thank you.
Second.
All right, thank you. Moving on now to the Class BV full liquor licenses. Again, all subject to legal requirements. Black Goose Company, Evelyn's Nanaquack Drive-In, Inc., Foodworth, Inc., DBA Atlantic Sports Bar and Restaurant, Quajon, Inc., DBA Little Bear Sports Lounge, Le Moulin Rouge, Inc., Michael Napolitano, DBA McCrae's Seafood, Newport Harbor Corp., DBA The Boathouse Restaurant, LLC. The DBA is an LLC? Interesting.
Yes.
You ever seen that before?
No.
Yeah. Riptide Sports Grill, Inc., Saconnet River Grill, Silva Brothers, Inc., DBA Barcelos Family Restaurant, Spring Restaurant, Inc., Susan's Restaurant, TRDR, Inc., DBA Red Dory Restaurant, Herbert Lyrics, LLC, DBA Lyrics Bar and Grill, Everett Lane, Inc., DBA Family Ties Restaurant, and Faith J. Bortz, DBA PJ's Cafe. Is there anybody that wants to be heard on this? Any objection to proceeding to a vote? May I have a motion for all 19, please?
So moved.
I think I heard Nancy on that. Denise, is that a second?
Yep.
Any objection to proceeding to a vote? Hearing none, all those in favor on all 19, subject to meeting legal requirements, 7-0. Justin?
Yeah.
Moving on with liquor licenses, subject to meeting all legal requirements, Class BVL, limited liquor licenses. That would be Classic Pizza Incorporated, Jackie's Galaxy Tiverton Incorporated, Soul Skibery Associates Incorporated, doing business as Four Corners Grill. Would anybody like to be heard on these matters? Any objection to proceeding to a vote?
Make a motion, we grant, meeting all legal requirements.
Any second?
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Class BT Bed and Tavern, subject to meeting all legal requirements, Senior Lifestyle Saconnet Bay Limited Partnership, doing business as Brookdale Saconnet Bay. Would anybody like to be heard? Is there any objection to proceeding to a vote? May I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion.
Motion from Joe, second?
Second.
By Nancy. All those in favor? 7-0.
Additional liquor license renewals, subject to meeting all legal requirements under Class D unlimited club licenses. Father Joseph Burr Columbian Club, doing business as Knights of Columbus. Woodrow L. Sylvia Post Home Association Incorporated. Bayview Holy Ghost Citizens Club. Would anybody like to be heard on these matters? Any objection to proceeding to a vote? May I have a motion?
Make a motion, we accept them.
Second.
All in favor?
We have already taken Class BC out of order, so we'll now proceed to item Part C, indoor shooting range renewals. Number 1, Randy LeBeau, doing business as Saconnet River Outfitters. Number 2, Tiverton Rod and Gun Club.
That's it.
Would anybody like to be heard? Is there any objection to proceeding to a vote? May I have a motion, please?
Make
on
a
hold?
motion, we grant that license.
Subject to all requirements. Is there a second?
Second.
Are you keeping up with us over here?
Yeah,
You got the
she's
tape
doing
going?
it.
Okay. I think we had a second from Denise.
Yep.
Stop me if you don't want to go to a vote. All those in favor? Thank you.
Okay, the public hearing would be closed because those were the
Yeah.
licenses that needed the public hearing. Your next batch are non-advertised, they're not even public hearings, actually, for the licenses. Those you don't need to read out. You can just say the category and take a vote there, unless any member of the council wishes to have them removed to be discussed.
I just say, just because it says public hearing on the agenda, we'll still leave it.
Yeah, it's not,
open.
that's not.
No, C2 says non-advertised.
Yeah, but it says public hearings on the agenda.
Yes.
Which is fine, but, by the way, we're catching up here, but if I would hope that these meetings don't go past 10 o'clock as a normal practice, and so more on that to follow, but I'm happy, I assume we're all happy to keep working on these tonight? Okay.
We still have executive.
Okay, Justin, take us away.
Okay, for category C2, non-advertised public hearing for liquor license renewals, subject to meeting all legal requirements, December 1st, 2018 to November 30th, 2019. Group 1 is approval of entertainment licenses. Would anybody like to be heard on this matter?
Just say as shown on the agenda.
Oh, as shown on the agenda. Any objection to moving to a vote?
I make a motion, we approve the licenses.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Part C2, Item 2, tobacco dealers license renewals, as shown on the agenda. Does anybody wish to be heard? Hearing none, is there any objection to proceeding to a vote? May I have a motion to approve all of them together?
I'll move to approve them all, subject to meeting legal requirements.
We have a motion.
Second?
All those in favor? Thank you.
C2-3, subject to meeting all legal requirements, victualizing license renewals, as appearing on the agenda. Does anybody wish to be heard? Any objection to moving to a vote?
Are we on 3?
Yes.
Yeah, we're on 3.
Yep, 3.
I do have a question for the town administrator. Not that I would like to hold up the license, but I am curious as to whether or not there is a resolution regarding Longplex in the planning board engineering bill.
The short answer is no. This has been discussed several times. There are outstanding bills by Steer Engineering that have not been paid. Both sides are pretty adamant, and I've suggested that they meet in the middle. That hasn't happened so far.
So what will happen if Longplex doesn't pay the bill?
If what?
What will happen if they refuse to pay the bill and Steer Engineering did all that work? Does the town, is the town responsible?
Technically not.
Tony?
What would happen is because Steer was engaged by the town
Yeah.
to collect the bill, they would sue the town. The town would then have to third party in Longplex, because that was one of the conditions for them going forward on this.
So how much is this bill so far?
It's approximately $10,000. And the question has come up, but it gets into a long discussion of whether there's any reason to this, to what extent the town had something to do with the issues that led to the dispute about the bills.
That's not one of the requirements for a victualling license. It goes to the certificate of occupancy. And I think that's where the town has leverage, to the extent that the town has leverage, but not for the victualling license.
Okay.
And by the way, though, this is a renewal because he had applied, but we've never issued him any because it's
he's not even open. All completed.
Okay, is there any more discussion on this matter? Can I entertain a motion to approve victualling license renewals on meeting all legal requirements?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Part C2, number 4, victualling license renewal extension of business for PP Gastronomy LLC, DBA Ploof Gastronomy. This is my favorite one.
We did that on purpose. It's really not their name. We just wanted you to say it.
Is that French? I don't know.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, Ploof Ploof.
Would anybody like to be heard on this?
Yeah, we have a question.
I can't do that.
And say Ploof Ploof aloud.
Nancy?
I have a comment on this.
Yes.
Originally, when they applied here, it was a takeout service only. This is down on Main Road.
On the side of Helga's.
On the side of Helga's Ice Cream, yes. But now, this application, if you notice in there, it's for seating inside. And the state has contacted us, they're working on it too. So I just want to make note that this is a little different than what they've had before.
This isn't a renewal, it's really
It's really an expansion on their takeout for seating inside.
Well, they have
Now-
both here, right? Extension of business? Is that what that means?
Yes.
But it's
So I'm just trying to draw your attention, it's a little different than.
Posted as a renewal? Do we have a posting problem here?
Yeah,
Well, I think it's an expansion, and
but
that's
they've
the
also
question.
expanded
Right.
it.
Renewal and an extension.
May I make a suggestion, Mr. President, based on your comments, actually? Renew the existing license. Continue the extension part so that you can get information at your next meeting to make a determination as to what the extension actually is and whether or not it's appropriate to approve. So the posting issue is eliminated if their existing license is renewed. To the extent that there's issues with posting on this and notice, that can be cured by putting it down for the next meeting and dealing with it on that basis.
So as not to waste the applicant's time, normally when someone comes in front of us for an expansion, there's documentation that comes with this. There's, documentation from the zoning official that says that they don't need zoning relief. There's documentation from the fire marshal. I mean, there's all these other things. And it's sort of clear, given that they've just handed in a map of their seats, that they may not be aware of that. So
They are aware, and we've been in contact with the building official and the fire marshal's office, so we're all collectively working on this together, along with the state.
Okay. So for now, we're just going to
Renew their existing.
renew their
I think
existing
they've been
license.
existing with seats in there as well.
Well, they
Let's-
have without a
Whatever,
license.
this
Without a
is what the license.
So let's not, yeah, okay. So I'll make a motion to, if we want, to renew the existing license for Ploof Ploof Gastronomy.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the renewal, but not the extension.
Yep.
Any comments? We proceed to a vote. All those in favor say oui.
We.
Merci beaucoup. Mr. Katz.
Moving on to C2, non-advertised public hearings for liquor license renewals, subject to meeting all legal requirements under the category of holiday license renewals. Per the agenda, would anybody like to be heard on these matters?
Yes, Mr. President, I would have to recuse myself from voting on that.
Well, on
As
one.
Ramco, Rachel McCarty, 1560 Bugamash Road.
And also the flea market.
That's later, yeah, that's later on.
Noted. Would anybody like to be heard on this matter? Any objection to proceeding to a vote? I'll entertain a motion to approve the renewal of these holiday license renewals.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Is there a second?
I think we have a second from Nancy. I think I heard.
Oh, I'm sorry. Why is everyone looking at me a second?
I don't know, you look interested.
Second.
All in favor?
Number 6, mobile home park license renewals. We have 4 on the agenda. Would anybody like to be heard? Any objection to proceeding to a vote? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve all 4 of them together?
So moved.
Subject to legal right. Thank you, Nancy. Second, please.
Second.
All those in favor? Is that,
Because I don't have
Counselor
to
Hilton,
put
on that
a
one?
recommendation
Yes,
yet.
yes,
we
yes.
didn't mean to rush you, did we?
Meeting.
Yep.
So we'll continue that to the 10th.
Yeah, she's fine with that.
7 empty.
No, it's manufactured home elderly, Country View
Oh,
Estates.
it's just country club.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mr. President, could we continue that to the 10th? I need a letter from the planning board, and it's, they have to give a recommendation by ordinance on that.
You want to vote, or you want that just to happen administratively on the agenda?
Don't we have to vote to
do it
continue?
I'll make a motion that we continue
Subject
it.
to?
We got a motion.
I'll make a motion, we continue it.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to continue number 7. That's the manufactured home elderly community license renewal for Country View. All those in favor of continuing to the 10th?
Yes.
Isn't that our next meeting?
Yeah.
The next meeting, whenever
Yep.
that may be. All right,
It's
thank
the
you.
10th.
Continuing on with non-advertised public hearings for liquor license renewals, subject to meeting all legal requirements. Category 8 is petroleum storage license renewals. Per the agenda, would anybody like to be heard on this matter? Any objection to proceeding to a vote?
I'll make a motion, we grant the license for petroleum storage renewals.
Second.
Licenses. All right, all in favor?
Fireworks license renewals, very excited about this. Would anybody like to be heard? Fire chief? Had fire chief come up before. Everybody happy on the fireworks? Okay.
Mr. President, I will recuse myself again.
Again?
Because of Ramco.
His cousin.
Very well. We have an open floor. Would anybody like to be heard on the fireworks license renewals as shown on the agenda? All right. Hearing no objection to proceeding to a vote, may I have a motion to approve all of them together, subject to meeting all legal requirements?
So moved.
Thank you, Denise. Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? That's 6-0 with a recusal.
Agenda item C2, where am I?
You've got to recuse yourself.
C210, antique license renewals, two businesses on the docket. Per the agenda, would anybody like to be heard on these matters? Any objection to proceeding to a vote, subject to meeting legal requirements? I'll entertain a motion to approve these license renewals.
I'll make, second.
All in favor?
Number 11, the flea market license renewal for Route 177 Flea Market.
Mr. President, I'll recuse myself again.
Just sit here.
You're a busy man.
Your recusal hygiene is perfect. I don't think you're technically required to leave the dais for that.
Yeah. He is. Yeah, he is.
Probably a good idea. Is it? Just in case. Anybody want to be heard?
Yes, Sally Black. I'd just like everyone to go down and see what a beautiful job they've done down there. They restored the whole thing. You can do fabulous Christmas shopping there. It's really fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's in support of the renewal? Right?
Yes. Oh, definitely. 100%. Thank you.
Very nice.
They worked very hard.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion approved. Does anybody else wish to be heard? Hearing none. All those in favor? 6-0 with the recusal.
Proceeding to C212, quarry license renewal. This is for Charles Colo. Comes with a planning board recommendation. Would anybody like to be heard on this matter? Any objection to proceeding with a vote? I'll entertain a motion subject to meeting legal requirements.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
All right, we did it. Yay. A lot of licenses.
Good job.
10:15. I think we're getting awfully late. What do folks think here?
Well, what would you like to do?
Well, Mr. President, I'd like to at least address the next item.
Okay, over to you.
The next item on the agenda is appointments and resignations. The appointment of, reappointment of William Compton as the administrative officer to the planning board. The planning board does recommend this approval. My concern is that the overlap of the administrative officer with the town planner, which has been subject to ongoing controversy for a long time, and unfortunately, as with the long solar hearing, we have a time issue here where the contract for the planner moves from probation to non-probation within a week, I believe it is. And because the planner and the administrative officer overlap, I'd like the opportunity to have a hearing and discuss the probationary period. Specifically, what I'd like to discuss is whether it can be extended, just so we have time to evaluate as a new council before we say the probation is ended. But I understand that'll require a hearing, and with timing limited as it is, I wouldn't want to take a vote to reappoint Mr. Compton if we're going to be discussing that matter.
The planner is under the jurisdiction of the administrator, correct? So it's him that recommends whether we extend it or we don't. Is that correct, Tony? It's not really a council decision.
Well,
Well, as far as the whole evaluation and so forth.
This was the reappointment as the administrator.
It has nothing to do with, right.
But not the planner.
Right. And the administration officer is under the town council, because the planning board answers to the town council, and so does the AL.
Yeah,
Now, the planner answers to the town administrator and is evaluated by the town administrator.
That's correct.
So it'd be the town administrator that would make the recommendation to us, and we either go forward or not, is that correct?
No, this is.
Not for the AL, I'm saying for the planner, because Justin is putting them both together.
Well, the problem is, we're within a week of this probationary period ending, and on our agenda right now, I see no recommendation from the town administrator one way or another on the planner. So if we don't take action within a week, the probationary period ends. And my concern here is if that is the case, I'm inclined to say without some ability to review the work and to understand the position and its necessity, an extended probationary period, I'm not comfortable renewing or moving beyond a probationary period, in which case I wouldn't be comfortable reappointing an administrative officer who may not be a planner with me.
It's two different.
I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. This is on the planner's contract, not on the administrative officer end.
Right.
Well, but it's relevant to the administrative officer.
Well, no, I know that, but you're talking about the probationary period as a planner.
Correct.
Okay.
Does the AO win that contract? The AO role?
Yes.
Yes. As, it's actually it's a requirement to be the planner, but to me, to extend the probationary period, that would have to be by agreement with the employee.
Right, and I understand that, okay, the probationary period is for any reason, the position can be ended. We need to have a hearing with the employee per the contract. It said there must be a hearing if you're not going to renew the probationary period. Yeah, if you're not going to renew it.
If it is a non-renewal.
Right.
Yes.
So what I'd like to see happen is for us to meet at the earliest opportunity, if that's Wednesday or Thursday, have that hearing, see if the planner is amenable to an extension of the probationary period so the new council can evaluate the position. And at that point, pending an approval of that extension, then reappoint as the administrative officer and follow whatever the administrator's recommendation vis-a-vis the planner would be, which again, we have no, on this last meeting where we would have the opportunity to consider his recommendation, we have no recommendation from the administrator.
Okay.
So, any objection to, does anything else on this agenda have to be heard tonight?
Executive does.
Executive. Critical tonight?
We have the lawyer here sitting there. And there is a critical.
Two things?
Yeah, the first
Are you going to accept my resignation?
No, you're stuck.
That's the first
You
thing.
and I both know you're not allowed to quit.
Yeah, I know. The second thing is if time is becoming an issue, on the executive session listed under solicitor, Moore versus the town of Tiverton, that can be extended to a later date, if that helps matters.
Well, it's almost 10:30. It sounds like the executive session is important. I'd like to suggest I'd actually like to have Justin wear the bullseye and figure out which of these items you think we should bring on to a meeting later this week.
Well, it depends on if anyone's available later.
We didn't set this very lengthy agenda, so I also don't want to be rushed. Although I do see we have some of our staff in the back, so if there's an item that they've been waiting for 3.5 hours to be heard on, I also kind of want to hear it too. So in the olden days, we had a rule that it took 2/3 vote to go past 10 o'clock. I'm hoping to see that rule come back, but I know that this is our first night. So.
All these things had to be put on there, that's why they're there. But.
Well, since you mentioned the staff that's here, you've had a chance to look at the auction of surplus vehicles, which might be a good thing because it would be good for us to be able to move ahead with that unless there are lots of questions about it. And you might want to hold off on it. I would think that the petition relating to joint pole locations for National Grid and Verizon is a routine matter that probably doesn't require much, if any, discussion. And National Grid is eager to get that approval. Also, the Tiverton wastewater district, it's something that actually would codify what is currently in place, which is an arrangement between the town and the Tiverton wastewater district, that the district can use the interceptor, which is still owned by the town. And the reason it's still being owned has to do with how that whole project was financed and bonded and everything else. But in the meantime, it would be good to actually have a legal agreement in place that governs that arrangement. All of that has been included in the packet and reviewed by the town solicitor. So I would hope that we might be able to move those things along.
Is it critical if it was today versus, say, Wednesday or Thursday?
I can't do Thursday.
But, yeah, the point was made, people need to be available to have, you need to have a quorum, so.
You need 4.
Okay, so why don't, may I suggest, let's do the auction? Let's wrap up at 10:30, and then we'll go to executive session up to midnight.
Well, I'm not sure what the process would be, but I would like to have the hearing and continuation of this reappointment. But we would have to add, that's not just a continuation if we're going to be discussing the probationary period, correct? So
We post a new agenda.
Right, so we would have to would we have to take some kind of action, a vote tonight to?
Yes.
So that, we would have to do that.
Like a special meeting.
Yes.
Yes. It'll be a
Yes.
special
And the agenda has
So then
to
we could make that motion, assuming, if that were to pass, we would then be able to continue these other items into that agenda. Is that correct?
Yes.
But it would have to be advertised for how?
48 hours, it would be
Okay.
a special meeting, but they would have
Right.
to have a specific agenda. Could be whatever items they want,
Right.
it has to be stated.
So that would be,
And you can't add after.
Would have to be
It would
posted
have to be,
tomorrow, Thursday.
for
For
Thursday.
Thursday.
What's the date, Thursday?
29th.
26th, 27th, 29th?
Thursday's the 29th, and nobody's here. Nobody's on the Wednesday, so the townhouse is available.
Okay.
Well,
Do you want to see the auction tonight?
Well, that could be Thursday as well, I suppose, but.
Whatever you want.
We could get through this really
Okay.
quick.
All right, so Justin, is that a motion to schedule a special meeting of the town council for Thursday night and continue all of these items, plus an additional item?
the additional, a public hearing, the required public hearing for the continuation of the planner's contract beyond the probationary period.
Okay. And is there anything else that
And
we?
It's not a public hearing though, is it?
Well, hearing,
No. No.
You can do that in executive session.
Executive.
Okay.
Under personnel.
Under personnel.
And you have to
he doesn't have
notify.
the option, does he have the option of a public hearing?
He has an option to have it heard in public.
Okay, so we can schedule it in executive, but then.
Correct, yes.
But then if he wants it out in public, we'll do both.
Correct.
Get notice.
You have to give him due notice.
Okay, and now what would, and due notice meaning?
I
This-
have a
Meeting
form
on
letter they
Thursday.
sign if they want it in closed session.
I'm working.
Okay, and that can happen before Thursday.
I'm working.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter.
What I will have is, actually, we'll have a recommendation for you in that case.
And now, would it be possible, appropriate, et cetera, for the administrator to discuss the possibility of extending the probationary period before that point?
There's a very good possibility that I would recommend that.
Recommend you do that?
Okay, so it's 10:30.
Right.
Was that a motion?
Yeah, the motion to continue all items remaining on the public agenda with
For
the.
open session.
For open session, with the addition on to continue to Thursday with the addition of hearing with the planner regarding the continuation of his probationary period.
All right, we have a
But this
motion.
is going to be a special meeting, I'm not continuing, I'm making a
Special
special meeting
meeting.
with everything on it.
Right. But also included in that motion is the
Yeah,
continuation of the
I-
items.
We're going to get in a big debate for I don't think it needs to be minutes. I think it could be a fresh posting, because none of these are.
That's
That'll
correct,
be a
yes.
fresh
So,
posting.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, you can't add anything.
That's fine.
And everybody's going to stick around for executive session, at least for an hour or something like that?
And I'm going to wait
Okay,
to,
so, all right,
just
we have a live motion and a second. May we go to a vote on that? All those in favor? Okay. Opposed? 6-1, all right.
Now,
I'm probably working Thursday, and you guys didn't seem to care. We could have made it another day.
There's no time left.
I'm sorry.
Be affirmative.
I'm about to close the open session, is that okay? We have to do the recitals for the executive session.
Mr. President, yes, you have to make a motion for the items in executive session, and it has to be a roll call vote.
Will do. Is there any objection to closing the open session?
Could have done it.
Second call? Okay.
Oh, okay, Saturday.
I don't think we need a vote to close the open session, do you agree? Okay. All right, there's going to be a roll call vote on this, everybody. There's actually going to be 3.
Like
Okay, I want to keep going. Yep. All right. We propose to take a short recess and then enter a closed executive session. The first agenda item would be for the purposes of potential litigation at the request of the town administrator. That's Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5A2. And for that, I would need a roll call vote.
Mr. President, before the motion and second is had,
Yep.
I just want to put on the record that the potential litigation concerns some personnel matters. And I can tell you that that employee has been notified that he can appear or have it in open session, and there was no response.
Very, very good. Thank you. Okay, roll call vote.
There was a response. He elected to not show up and not do an open session. I'm sorry.
There's another lawyer in the room.
Motion to go into executive session?
Second.
We do have a motion and a second. We'll proceed to a roll call vote.
Yes,
Joe?
yes.
Tricia?
Yes.
Denise?
Yes.
Justin? Yes. Donna? Nancy?
Yep.
And the chair votes yes also. We will then remain in executive session
Would be
at
my
the
name.
request of Counselor DiMaderos for the purposes of collective bargaining with IBPO and IAFF. That's under Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5A2. May I have a motion, please?
Motion?
And a second?
Second.
Yes. Proceed to a roll call.
Yes.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. And then we will remain further in executive session at the request of the town solicitor.
Mr. President,
Sir.
Motion to.
in the interest of time, you can move that not so much to your Thursday meeting, but to your next regular meeting.
Okay, is there any objection to that? Okay, having heard that, we will now conclude the open session, take a short recess, and reconvene. Thank you.
One thing
very
I'd
much.
like to mention is the Tiverton High School football team won the championship. And also next Saturday, there's the tree lighting ceremony, and the Recreation Committee had asked me to invite all the council members and the people in the town to attend at 4:45 on Saturday, December 1st.
Rob, I am.
Field hockey and soccer ones, boys and girls.
Nobody told me that, so.
Donate an ornament to the train.